And I think we're live, Tushar. So I'll give a few minutes for people to join. Hopefully they
Hmm.
join. But if not, that's okay. I mean, it's still early for me. It's a bit late for you, but it's still manageable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining. And if you don't mind, just say hi in the chat so we know you could hear me. And also the chat is working. This is the first time I'm doing LinkedIn Live, so hopefully it works out just fine. I mean, only if you feel comfortable, of course. Yeah. Otherwise, we'll just be talking to ourselves, which I don't mind. I mean, I'm always happy to talk to Tushar, and also just kind of doing things. Oh, hey Meredith, good to see you. Thanks for being here. And it is from LinkedIn. It does signal that it's from LinkedIn Live, so I think that's working.
I married it.
All right. So I think because we have a lot of ground to cover, so we probably just get started, Tushar,
Yeah.
and we'll just go and then we'll constantly come back and check we'll check the questions, and we'll have another user that pop up on LinkedIn Learning. So awesome. So I guess this morning LinkedIn Live is winning versus YouTube. Yesterday was kind of the opposite. It was like uh, more YouTube than Twitter. But yeah, so let me go ahead and swap back to the questions and answers that we'll conduct today. So of course, today's session is about technical book publishing, and I want to start out with why we're doing this session because after I published my first book in 2017. Um, Whenever I go to conferences, whenever I chat with people, there's always one of the questions that pop up. It seems like everybody, and I believe this, is that everybody has a book in them, especially engineers. They always feel passionate about some projects. They always very knowledgeable in their domain. So everybody has a good book idea, but it just go about getting it into print if that's the way they prefer, or getting into other formats, maybe like an ebook or a course. Those are the difficult parts, or those are the questions that because it seems like such a daunting task, so they don't even start. Which I think it's not a great thing, right? It makes me sad. Like the world needs more knowledge. The world needs more engineers who share the knowledge, and just collaborate, and the ideas will bounce off each other. So we came about this. I was talking to Tushar, which is on the screen right now. He'll have a chance to introduce himself. But we were talking about it. We're saying, hey, none of us have done LinkedIn Live before, so let's try that. Let's do that live streaming, and let's make it useful for people too about technical book publishing, and so on. So, um, Tushar, why don't we just start with you? Introduce yourself a little
Yeah.
bit and tell people who you are.
Yeah. So I'm Tushar. I work as a book producer at Packt. Packt is quite an enthusiastic place to work at, and well, I've learned a lot over the last 7 years now. Wow, I've completed 7 years at Packt. Uh, so I don't come from a tech background, but it's all thanks to experts like you, Eric. I get to learn a lot every single day. I ask a lot of questions about why we are covering this and why does a book need it. So there's a lot of research that goes on at the back end. So I get to meet with a lot of experts day in and day out, and just hear the ideas out, research quite a bit whether there are actual pain points in the industry, whether the community is looking for a book as such or not. So we look at trends, we look at a lot of different places with what's really happening in the community. So when this idea came up with about Python networking, that's one of the things that we looked at. That what are there other books out there? At that point in time, there were not a lot of books, and Eric, your book was the first one, about the earlier ones at the time. So right now we are planning the next edition of the book. So while planning the next edition of the book, it's like over the last three editions we covered quite a lot of ground. Now, what do we add in next, other than just adding more and more about different technologies, about Ansible or Jenkins, asynchronous programming. So what do we do next? So it's about just understanding what the community needs, what are their pain points. So one of the major reasons for this session is also that to understand what people really need to learn from this book.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So I think you cover a lot of ground there, Tushar. So we'll definitely dive into each of these what you're saying, because what you talked about, looking at the community pain point, that goes directly into generating a book idea, right? And when you talked about finding out experts, that goes into how do a person like an engineer get discovered by people like you who are actively seeking out. So it's kind of like the meeting of the minds is where are the mediums to
Yeah.
go about doing that and so on. So I think one of the questions we could go over first, as we were discussing offline before the streaming, about how to get started in Python network automation. And I think it's a big topic, and I've actually conducted separate sessions, which was a YouTube live stream before, on how to get this started. But basically, I think there are three steps. One is actually to get the foundations down. So, if you're, for example, Python network automation, right? You can't automate something that you don't really know. So you want to get the
Mm,
foundation of networking done. So you maybe, if I were to overlay this with a certification, maybe like a CCNA level, you want to do the get the foundation down, get the basics of Python. You don't need to get be experts, but you do have to at least know the basics of Python. Then you marry the two of joining a community, buying a book, or there are various free resources out there and great recommendations for people. I've included a few of them in my previous YouTube streaming, which I'll include in the show notes. But so those are, I think, the three things that you want to do when you get started. Make sure you know the basics. Make sure that's both network engineering and Python, and that's joining a good community because you want to get motivated, you want to find out more use cases, and also find good resources like books, classes, videos, and so on. So I think those are the three things that you could get started with Python. So I think the next question is just, who's this guy on the screen talking to me, and why is he doing this session? Right, we already covered why the session was required, but so I'll go over my kind of background and experience. I've been in the networking industry for about 20 years. I started in the millennium. When I graduated
mm,
from college, I had a internship toward the end of my college year to work for an ISP. So then, after I graduated, they offered me a full time position. Then I started working for the ISP, gradually going to, and that was when the United States was building out broadband actively. So back then, back in the Stone Age, kids, we
mm.
used to have a phone line that dials up and have those beep 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 sound, and you dial line with 28K. That was, 56K was the bomb, guys. But anyway, so that was dial up, and then there were a lot of ISPs were actively, and then it came ADSL and then cable modem. So a lot of ISPs were actively building out broadband network in the United States, and so I joined one of the ISPs called Time Warner Cable, and so it's a subsidiary of the Warner Brothers, and then I'm sorry, AOL Time Warner, and then join ISP, start working for vendors, and then start working for cloud providers, and then different cloud providers, and then came to my current employer, which is A10 Networks. So my publishing experience started when I was after I left Microsoft, I think. So after I left Microsoft, I started to think about, okay, what do I want to do? And one of the things I feel passionate and not enough of was not enough of this great thing that I found so amusing and so fascinating, but nobody was talking about it, which is network automation using Python. And I remember I just feel very frustrated. I couldn't find like-minded people on, it's like, okay, I just want to talk to somebody about it. I want to hear what their use cases are and what am I doing? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? So what I ended up doing was just making a ton of mistakes. I was like, I said this many times and I truly believe this was the case. I was like the crash dummy. The car commercials where they have the crash dummies, they slam me into a wall. So I was like that crash dummy for network automation with Python. So I try out everything. And what I wanted to do at the time was to summarize all the mistakes I've made and tell people not to make those mistakes. So
Mm,
the persona or the intended audience was a younger Eric. when you first, when I see myself as 5 years ago when I first started out this path, what do I wish I had known? And then so I don't waste all these time, or not not exactly waste, um but I could have been more efficient, right? Had I not look at 10 different libraries. If I just look at two libraries that end up working out great, then it would have saved me a lot of time. So that was my background. And then, one thing led to another. We'll go into that later on, get the book published. And, you know, fortunately, it was well received in the community. And now we're in the third edition, as Tushar was mentioning, going on the fourth edition. So that was like in a nutshell. And I also went into this a little bit. This next question was, how did the book publishing opportunity came about for Eric? I'm sorry, I'm dominating the forum, Tushar, but it just so happened like I organized these questions in the wrong way. But I promise Tushar will have a lot of opportunity to talk about the publishing process. So I started out my blog. So like I said, I was frustrated, but I didn't think of myself as an author. I thought of myself as just being someone who has something to say and to share. So I started out my blog back in 2016. I want to say even earlier than that. I'm sorry, 2011. I started out my blog. I just wasn't publishing regularly. So I started out, start writing about the stuff I feel passionate about, which is Python network automation. Start writing about OpenFlow, and one of the blog posts. This was like 40 or 50 blog posts in, right? So it wasn't like it was an instant success. It was just something I wrote on as a side hobby. And one of the blog posts actually ranked pretty high for OpenFlow on Google. At the time, I remember this was about POX controller. So OpenFlow at the time was written in Java. And so their controller was in Knox, which was in Java. But somebody forked that and used Python to do the same functions, but in Python, called POX. But the documentation was a bit lacking. I think the engineer was more passionate about writing code than documentation. So I spent a lot of time just fiddling around with the software, looking at the software, banging my head against the wall. And so I ended up writing that blog post, which ended up being something that people refer to quite a bit. And so it ranked pretty high on Google. And that is when Packt came in, knock on the door and say, hey, would you be interested in publishing? So that was how I came about. Is that how, I guess we could jump over to the question to Tushar about, so how do you generally go about finding out experts in the community and potential authors, Tushar?
I think there are two different ways to go about it.
Yep.
So one of the ways would be that someone gets in touch with us directly and says that I have X number of years of experience and I have a book in me, and this is the idea that I would like to write a book on. So when such a thing happens, then we conduct our research and we see if the topic is actually trending, and if the person who got in touch with us actually an expert to write such a book. Because at the end of the day, it is about serving the community. If the community does not feel that the person writing the book is the best one to write it, then it's no point. So it's like if I write a book on Python network automation with 10 hours a day of research, no one is going to buy that book. People are going to be like, what is he talking about? It's just a summation of 10 different articles that I could have found online. Why did I even pay for this book? And that's 1 star on Amazon throughout from everyone. So that's one thing that we do. And the second way of doing it is we look at a lot of technologies and trends ourselves. We keep an eye out on them. And so once we've identified that this is going to be the next big thing, or this is where the technology is trending, we then start looking out for experts. And that is when someone got in touch with you, Eric, that we can see that you've written n number of articles, and there is one of your recent articles which is just blown apart. It's breaking the internet. And why not write a book? Since you're so good with writing, you've got a flair for it. So that's the other way of it. And then we discuss it with experts like you. And so yeah, these are the two main ways that we do things.
Yeah, so that's always tricky to share, right? Because that's always the $1 million question. It's all everybody's asking, like VCs are asking, employers, employees, the startups are all asking, what is the next big thing? So it's hard to And of course, you mentioned that, and the risk is a little lower than VCs, but still, it's valid nonetheless, right? Like, how do you identify the trend? How do you know this is a idea worth exploring?
Yeah, I'm only a VC in the sense that I don't have I with the lack of money in my bank account. But yeah, so the main thing that we do is we keep an eye on technology,
Yeah.
about what the current trends are, the pain points. So the pain points have to match the trend. It's not only about the trends in the industry. Uh, so if there are a lot of pain points, a lot of people looking for articles, you can look at multiple places. There's Stack Overflow. Now you've got Reddit. A lot of people talk about technology. They ask questions. How do you go about these things? There's Quora. So we keep an eye out on all of these things. And at this point in time, we are in the luxury of having published what about over 6,500 books now. So we have a certain amount of target audience. So we can always get in touch with them. And so when we do update books, like when we plan out second or third editions, in your case, the fourth edition of the book, we try and get in touch with the previous edition readers. We ask them what did they like about the book, whether the tone of voice was nice, whether the book was deep enough, the content, if they felt the content was shallow. So we try and identify trends even in that. So if a lot of people come back to us and they say that probably the book should have been deeper, the content was a bit shallow and I didn't like it. So if there is a trend with a lot of people saying that, then with the next edition we'll try and do that. So it's always about improvising. It's you don't repeat the same mistakes. You learn from it and then you correct it.
Hopefully, right? Hopefully, like
Yeah,
I constantly do that, so I had need to
yeah,
remind myself not to repeat my mistakes.
yeah.
So I want to remind people who join the stream, keep those questions coming. I love them. So I so Meredith actually asked me, asked on the comment section, and where do you publish
Mhm.
the article that got so much traction? It was a free platform. I think it was Blogger. So keep in mind this was 2011. So and I wasn't really that much into like website building, or I just want to get something out. So I chose a free platform, the Blogger platform, and I just started writing. They were able to, even back then, they were able to CNAME, have your customized domain. So I think I did register a domain and then just CNAME that to Blogger. Um, but I guess Blogger actually is actually owned by Google, so they're actually the search would just work, right? Hopefully.
Yeah.
So that was the platform that I published on initially, and then later on, I started building on my platform as well. So, but that was a separate story. Like I wanted to learn about Django, I wanted to learn about Wagtail. So I was trying to solve my own problem and say, okay, well, in this case, so Blogger has some limitations, like the formatting and the layout are actually restricted by like their cookie cutter templates, so they could only have certain layouts. But if I wanted to add something new, then it's a bit more difficult. So that's why I went and started doing my own platform, basically for learning, and also I think that would have uh, generated more ideas for me as far as future blog posts. Yeah. So thanks for the question. Then so the next one that I generally receive when people ask me about my book publishing experience was, what is kind of like the general workflow for a book, from just an idea in your tingling in your mind to finally seeing on the digital bookshelf on Amazon. So do you want to take a bite into that, Tushar?
Yeah, so writing a book, it always starts with an idea. Uh,
Sure.
Firstly, it starts with an interest that I can write a book. And then people think that, okay, now I can write a book. What is the book that I would like to write on? So they identify a topic. So a lot of us do that. So if we get in touch with people who would like to write a book, but they're not sure, uh,
Right.
we try to understand what their profile is, what their skills are, what they've done, and where they can contribute. And then we try and identify the topics within that. And the main thing to keep in mind is the topic, what you want to write a book on, and then the second thing is the pain points.
Hmm.
So you have to match it with that. So it cannot just be a general book on, say, what is Python? There are tons of books out there. There are tons of articles out there. People don't really need to pay for books to know what Python is or just to learn the basic code syntax of Python. But yeah, it has to be a bit more detailed because these are paid books. This is not free content. So it has to be a bit more detailed. There has to be actual pain points that people would like to learn and understand. So one of the common things that I heard about your book, and you would hear that too, that as you rightly said in the beginning, that when you started writing, it was a lot about the common mistakes that you made, and you don't want people to make those mistakes. So a lot of your book is the content in your book is filled with best practices. So most of the people that I got on a call with among readers and I spoke to, they said that I use this book as a reference guide. With every
Mhm.
new edition, I purchase this book, and as and when I'm working on that part aspect of network automation, I go to that chapter and I look at it and I see what Eric is telling me to do, and then probably I follow the steps. And yeah, so that's actually how it happens. That's the ideation bit, the initial bit. And once
Right.
ideation happens, uh, it's about having a logical TOC, just keeping the target audience in mind, that this is my target audience, or let's say in your case, that this is my persona, this is Eric 5 years ago. So, what would Eric like to learn 5 years ago? He would like to be introduced with Python automation, and then slowly and steadily, he would like to gradually build up to a position where he would like to work with cloud architecture, different clouds, and uh, at a point, then he would like to get with multi clouds, how to work with all of them, and then finally be able to test the network automation. So yeah, it's just a logical learning curve that you develop with your TOC. So once the author does that, we do a lot of bit of research. We try and understand whether it is actually logical. Has the author covered all the possible libraries that he could have? So because there's a limitation of the book, you cannot cover hundreds of libraries. So you pick up the best ones available, and then you try and cover them in the book. Uh, and then after that, so once the ideation is completed, the TOC is completed, that's when we get the author on board officially with a contract, and then the chapter writing starts. Then the author starts writing chapters, and then yeah,
Yeah.
so
No,
yeah,
I was gonna say, a lot of people a lot of people were maybe didn't realize how much work ahead, how much preparation work goes
mm,
in before the book was published, right? So, like you said, so the idea itself needed to be vetted out. So, in my own personal experience, back in 2017, when I first had the idea, they would reach out, and that was a bit of a back and forth between just iron out like the precisely what you want to say, right? Like it's not the book about open flow, even though that was the article that
yeah,
people can notice on, but how do we extract that and have a wider appeal on uh on the most on the most targeted audience, as wide but also very focused. So there's a lot of just idea generation, as Tushar was talking about the TOC, the table of contents, and also within each table of contents in your proposal that you write would actually include like a summary, a general idea of what this chapter would cover. And
yeah,
this is very common amongst all different publishers, right? Like so I also worked with O'Reilly. I also have proposals submitted, worked out with various other publishers, not just Pack, but this is pretty common. It's just like they
yeah,
want to, your editor and you would have to come up with a very precise, uh, well, not very precise, but at least 70% general understanding of how the book will go about. And it also
yeah,
helped you as the author to kind of think about the topics as well as what are the gaps I need to fill and how
mm,
much time do I generally need. If I know this topic, like the back of my hand, then that's a lot quicker than something like just say, yeah, I'm vaguely interested and I know I'm very enthusiastic about it, but I still need a lot of gap to fill in. So
yeah,
those were kind of the issues that arise. So there was the proposal, and you submitted proposal to the publisher, and they would actually there's a vetting process, right, Tushar? Like it's not every proposal gets approved.
yeah. So a lot of proposals don't get approved. So in those cases, we actually try and shift the author to a different idea, or
Hmm.
if, yeah, well, if the author is not interested in. But one of the major things that helps with all of this vetting process and with all of this idea generation bit is that a skeleton of the book is ready in front of you.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
you get to writing the chapters, uh, it's completely there for you. So you know what you had in mind. So rarely would be the case where the author would be like, during the TOC development, I thought that it would make sense, but now it doesn't. But yeah, there are times that people do feel that at that point in time, I thought that it would make sense, but he or she would believe that at this point it doesn't. So yeah, we then skip those chapters or we leave them out completely.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. It's
Yeah.
valid work. It's a process that's been fine tuned, as in the case of Pact, right? Like 6,500 books, and 6,500 times that this is what works. Like you do need that process of just thinking it through. So I'm speaking from an author perspective, right? You do need that process of just laying out a logic, and a lot of times it makes sense in your head, but once you put it on paper, then you're like, oh, okay, well, it doesn't really make sense to jump from topic A to topic B. There should be some kind of on ramp and a gentle on ramp for people. So
Yeah.
it is a process that works, and don't be discouraged if you're faced with, oh my god, this publisher asked me to write a proposal that is 10 pages long. How am I going to do that? But it's worth the process. It's a
Yeah.
worthwhile exercise.
Yeah. And it's not always a one-way effort. That, well, we are there as well to support the authors who try and come on board. So wherever we find gaps, we always probe them further. We ask them the right questions to guide them in the right way.
Yeah, for sure. So it's definitely a collaborative process. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the editors who I've worked with. They really helped a lot. Especially Tushar. Tushar, you've been very helpful in hammering out the ideas. Certainly for the third edition, but the first and second edition editors. I appreciate them as well. So
Yeah.
we have a few questions that popped up. So
Hmm.
let's go over them.
Yeah.
So I think Yuri asked, I'll repeat this. Do you beta test chapters, topics of a book with selected audience, possibly changing the depth and topic as you get more feedback? What do you say to that, Tushar? Do we?
Yes, we do. So we have technical reviewers on board.
Yeah.
We have internal editors on board. There are different roles. So the technical reviewers read through the chapter. They try and understand the content, just as a reader would. So for them, it's the first draft of the chapter. Unfortunately for them, it's a very, very early draft. It's a raw draft where they have to try and make sense. So wherever they can't make sense, they add comments and they send it back to us. They
Yeah.
help us test the code. We also get beta users on board.
Right.
So yeah, so beta users get early access to all the chapters. They read through the content as well. They test the code. Uh, they give us more feedback too. And internally, we have technical editors who test the code. Then we've got content development editors who run through the entire content and just try to smoothen the learning journey as much as possible. So yes, we do
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah. And from an author's perspective, I take it as advice, but I don't take it as the final say, right? Like I think there's a certain way, you know, you could call me stubborn or you could call me just a strong-minded person, but there's a certain way I want my book to be organized, or there's certain elements I want my book to present. So like I take it as a strong advice for sure. I listen to them, I read all the reviews, but at the end of the day, if I disagree and I'm firm on my disagreement, then the author actually has the final say, I think. And
Yeah,
that's true with editors as well. So I've worked with editors who may have certain ideas or certain uh, thought process that I disagree with, and usually I would say 90% of the time it's a collaborative process that we worked out, like just a solution
yeah,
that both of us could accept. But if push comes to shove, I think the author has the final say, because at the end of the
yeah,
day, it's your name on the cover, and it's your work that's being publicly judged on. So
yeah,
it's you that being judged on. So, but
yeah, and
this is a fantastic question. I love
yeah,
this interaction. So thank you so much, Yuri, for posting it.
yeah. Thanks, Yuri.
Yeah, and also there's another one from Meredith. What do you think would be a more popular book, a high-level best practice book or deep dive technical book on one subject? So I have my
Hmm.
own idea, but I'll let Tushar go first.
I think it completely depends from topic to topic. Uh, like Python network automation has been there for quite a while now.
Yeah.
So having a deep dive technical book on Python network automation would probably make sense if it would be an academic book. But what we cater to mostly is not an academic audience. We cater to developers, programmers in the real world with real jobs. Uh, that is one of the major reasons why Eric's book works with best practices approach. Had it been that our core audience would be academic, and early level audience, a deep dive technical book would really work. But yeah, it depends from publisher to publisher and topic to topic.
I would agree. So for a technical deep dive book, just from speaking to other authors and speaking to various different publishers, I think a technical deep dive book, you would have a good reach if it end up being a textbook, right? Like if
Yeah,
it's a required reading from a professor at a college,
yeah,
then heck, you're guaranteed some income, guaranteed exposure year after year. You're guaranteed like 4 editions after, right? But those most of the time, those books are written by professors. I don't know if that's like a popular thing or the correct thing to say, but I mean, most when I went through college, most of my college textbooks are either written by the professor I'm taking a class with, or written
yeah,
by other professors in other universities, right? And
yeah,
they get paid for writing papers and publishing books and articles. Whereas in from my background as an engineer, coming here for me, I think a higher level best practice book works out better. And
yeah,
I also want to pass the baton to Tushar on this, but I also think there are also different best practice type, right? So
mm,
there's this, like, I'll teach you this technology, and also there's also the cookbook. There's also the reference book type. So Tushar, you want to give a little reference on kind of the kind of series of
yeah,
titles or book type of books that for best practice.
yeah. Yeah, so there are different books at Pact. So Pact follows a basic series of, so when it's an early level audience, the book will always be titled Learning
Yeah,
XYZ, whatever the
right.
topic would be. So that would be an early level audience. And then when you move on to an intermediate level audience, they mostly prefer, if you want a learning path where you want to be introduced to a different concept, they would ideally pick up books like Eric's, which is mastering books, so which is catered to an intermediate audience. But when people need actionable items, they don't need a lot of theory in the book. They just want to follow tasks or recipes, as we call them.
Yep.
They would pick up cookbooks. Cookbooks are extremely popular in the tech publishing industry, where there is literally no theory in the book. The entire book just follows different tasks. So yeah, each chapter is filled with recipes, and each recipe is a task basically. But Meredith, you ask an important question. So there are a few books at Pact which are deep dive technical books. Now, when these books were published initially, these were popular topics like Python machine learning. It's one of the most popular books at Pact, written by Sebastian Rashka. Again, he is also a professor. So when he wrote this book, it was a deep dive book, and it still continues to be, and it is extremely popular with an early level audience and with academics. And then there was a book written by Robert Sutor. Uh, the book was titled Dancing with Qubits. It was an early introduction to quantum computing. The book is extreme difficult with math, and it's an early level audience picking up the book. Like I'm really proud of the math that I understand, like a typical cliche that an Indian understanding math, and I'm really proud of it. But I started reading through that book, and after 15 pages, I couldn't keep track of the math in the book. It's that heavy, and academics love that book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So obviously there are certain categories that the publishers and the authors follow. which was, like what Tushar was saying, the learning path, and then the mastering path, and then the cookbook path. Um, but it also has to do with the maturity of the technology, like
Yeah,
what you were saying, Tushar. It was, machine learning is inherently full with math, or the Cubist book, you full with scientific terms and
yeah,
math and all of that. So even the learning series, which is intended for introductory,
yeah,
is still quite a bit of a jump
yeah,
for normal folks like you and I, who just casually pretty good at
yeah,
math, but not math majors in college.
yeah,
So yeah. So I hope that answered the question, as far, so it depends on technology, depends on the maturity of the technology, and also your intended audience, I think.
yeah.
So there's
Uh,
another.
yeah,
Go ahead.
Eric, one thing I would quickly like to cover. Thank you everyone for your questions. We forgot to mention this early on, but please feel free to ask as many questions as you would like. Um, I think after this live show is ended, and Eric would publish this on LinkedIn and YouTube. So we'll randomly go out and pick five people who've asked the best questions, and we'll conduct a giveaway of Eric's book. If you've read through Eric's book, uh, we would welcome your feedback, and you can pick out any one of the 6,500 books in Pack's catalog, and we'll help you get the ebooks for free. So yeah,
Nice.
the,
Yeah, that, sorry, I forgot to mention it. So Tushar
yeah,
literally like told me 5 minutes before we started, and it's like, yeah, that's great. And but I just didn't stick in my mind. Sorry about that. But thank you, Tushar, and thanks Pack Publishing for generosity of sharing the assets. Yeah, so there's another great question from Meredith. And so the
Mm,
question was, it sounds like the book writing sounds like a big time commitment that could personally rewarding, but can you actually make money writing a book? That is actually probably the top three questions I get. And that is why I prepare two additional questions that we'll go over in a bit. So one is, how do you, like, what's considered a good performing book, right? So like if your book is not performant, then obviously you're not gonna make any money. But there's also a base amount of money that you could make, and so on. So there's two questions later on regarding this question. One is, how do you determine the book is doing good? Like, what target should you shoot for? And the second was, what were the different revenue stream for an author? And so not just the royalties, but there are also other revenue streams as well. So thanks, but thanks for the question. That's excellent one, and I would tell you that's one of the top three, if not the top question I get. But that's why we'll go over that in more depth later on. So actually, as you would have it, so what are the different revenue streams? And
mm,
that's actually the next question. Just so coincidence that that we get that. So
yeah.
well, Tushar, why don't you go first? I get tired of hearing my own voice.
So there are multiple revenue streams. So Amazon is one of our major channels where we sell books at other than our own platform. So selling units of the book is one of the revenue streams. The others are the book gets translated into multiple different languages. Eric, your book has popularly gotten translated into four different languages over editions. Each edition has four different languages. They get translated. Then, so what else? There are conference opportunities that come up for authors once a book gets popular. There are, in fact, even job opportunities which opens up when people start seeing that the book is getting popular and the author is getting more and more renowned. Uh, then the book gets converted into a course, it gets
Yep.
converted into a video, and if there are some popular organizations or Fortune 500 organizations which comes up, so we create a learning path for them specifically. So any and every revenue that is generated by the book, it is, well, the authors get royalties for it. So yeah, there are multiple
Yeah.
streams for the revenue.
Yeah, definitely. So you would get, so when you worked out the proposal and kind of formulate this project idea, not just the contents but also the project, you would work out a royalty percentage with your publisher. It's different from everybody, and it's also a royalty advancement which is something that gets subtracted on later on. So it's an advancement on your royalty. So it's not free money, but it's a commitment from the publisher to the author to to say, regardless of how the book sells, these are the money that you would guarantee to get. So
Yeah.
those are kind of money that you're guaranteed. And when once the book is published, depending on the sales volume, you deducted that from your royalty advancement. So
Yeah.
that's I don't know what the technical term is, but I generally referring to it as earning out your royalty. So,
Yeah.
let's just say it's $10 and you get $1 per book, then you sell 10 books, but you don't get any money because you already like they already paid you basically. But starting from the 11th book, then you will start get paid. So those are the royalty advancements. And so,
Yeah.
as what Tushar was saying, once the book is published, there's several ways that you could still generate revenue besides the original royalty percentage. One is you can make your book into a video course, which I have done twice on because videos are generally take longer than the book form, not the producing time, but like just the length of the course. So I
Mm.
divided that into two courses. So there's two video courses based on the book, three actually. One is not by me. See, they just took the content and make that into a course. And of course, there's translation, and the translation varies because is a each country has different going rate for what they pay to Pact, or what they pay for royalties. So each of them is a little bit different. And yeah, I actually got to know this part better because I wanted to translate my book into Chinese. So I actually work with a Chinese publisher, and they went ahead and bought the translation rights. I ended up translating. So I should have more information on that, but it's too specific, right? So it's not,
Yeah.
I don't want to disclose it here. If you're interested in that, I could share you with that one data point, but it's a bit specific in that regard.
Yeah.
So
So what Eric was
anything,
actually, sorry, go
yeah.
on, Eric.
No, go
Yeah.
ahead, Tushar, please.
Yeah. So what Eric was talking about earlier was advances. So while the authors are writing the chapters of the book, we agree on an X number of advances against royalties. So during the writing course of the book, while the book gets published, we pay those advances in installments. So as and when we keep on receiving chapters, we keep on releasing these payments while the book is published. And once the book is published, the book starts selling and it starts generating its revenue. So these advances, as Eric mentioned, whether the book sells enough or not, this is a minimum guarantee that the author does get paid. And then once the book starts performing better and better over the period of time, these initial advances are recouped. And once it's recouped, you start generating more royalties over the period of time, and that gets paid once a quarter. And there is complete transparency at the end of every quarter, you receive your own royalty statement where you can see where the revenue was generated from, if it was from a certain channel, whether it was translation right, whether it was coursework, and what was the revenue generated on that, and then you see your bifurcation of your royalties from it. So yeah,
Yeah. So I think generally it's per quarter. That's the same with the
yeah,
two publishers I work with. But sometimes the publisher would say they would, do a monthly payout and so on. But I don't think that's very common. So the general, like whichever publisher you work with, you could probably bank on quarterly. And
yeah,
sometimes it takes one quarter to aggregate because there's book returns and
yeah,
like the revenue gets later. So it's so for example, if it's Q2, end of Q2, you actually get the payout from Q1 of that
yeah,
year, and then Q3, the end of Q2, so on and so forth.
yeah.
um
The reason mainly for that is a lot of channels pay out later. So they
yeah.
wait for the entire revenue to be accumulated and then they pay out in the following quarter. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. So I mean, that's just the way things work
yeah,
because there's so many different revenues, so many
yeah,
different channels basically.
yeah.
Um, so you mentioned performance we mentioned performance a few times, Tushar. So
Hmm.
should we just go over what is considered
Yeah.
good performance growth?
So a good performance for any book would be firstly acceptance from the community.
Okay.
How is the community responding to the book? Whether it's they are so you would see that on Goodreads, you would see that on Amazon, If people really like the book, they even go ahead and post about the book in their blogs, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. So you would see the response from the community about the book. One is that, and second is always the revenue. The more number of books that sells is the better the revenue of the book. And
Yeah.
if the book continues to sell well, uh, the other countries where English is not predominantly the primary learning language, they pick up the book to translate it into a different language. So yeah, you would see a lot of Japan, China, uh, South Korea, sometimes Russia. So a lot of countries where English again is not the predominant language of learning. They pick up the books and they translate it. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So, what about ranking though? So, like, the book sales numbers, of course, right? Like,
yeah.
that's kind of a given, but kind of subjectively, how do you know? So, for example, somebody wants to write a book on
Hmm.
machine learning, and they want to know what is the best selling machine learning book. So they will look at, ranking on Amazon, for example. So, ranking
Hmm.
wise, what would you say kind of a benchmark range that you say, okay, I look at that ranking and it's probably one of the book that actually generates revenue, like the author have earned out their royalty, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah. So this is something that I've been keeping a track of since quite a long time
Yeah,
now.
right.
So books under 100,000. So there are about, wow, I hope I don't get the number wrong. I believe there are about more than 6 million books on Amazon in the
Yeah,
Amazon store. So
yeah,
anything under 100,000 ranking on Amazon, that means a book is selling really well. Anything close to it is doing all right. And then the moment it slips over 500,000 or over a million, that means the book is not really selling well. And
right. So
one,
go ahead.
yeah.
No,
Yeah,
no, go
and
ahead, please.
once you publish a book, so authors do get the Amazon data as well. So Eric, you would have this because your name is mapped on Amazon, so you can go and check the daily units of your book. Amazon provides this data to authors and to publishers, so there is completely transparency again. So it's not that the publishers hide that data from the authors, because authors have that transparency. They can see the range of the book ranking over the period of time. They can see the trend. So if the author has made a post or if the author has just spoken at a conference, they could probably just come back and see it after a week, and they can see that, oh, so this is what happened. I made a post and then all of a sudden my Amazon book ranking went really low, or I sold a lot of units on Amazon. So
Right,
just to see what really works, or I spoke at a conference and I distributed a discount code, and all of a sudden my book is in 10,000 ranking on Amazon, which
right,
is an amazing place to be if it's in
right.
10,000 out of 6.5 million.
Oh, for
So yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
was gonna
yeah,
say
that's very good to see.
absolutely. So, unfortunately, those are kind of indirect signals of the success uh, of your marketing effort, right? But
Yeah,
back to what Tushar was saying, yes. So, in the author portal on Amazon, um, generally they would give tracking of about 8 million books. So,
yeah,
6.5, 8 million books. So it's a ginormous amount of
yeah,
books, right? But consider those are the books that are still in circulation and some are out of circulation, right? So
yeah,
that's including all the Harry Potters and all
yeah,
the I don't know, Dune, like that just came out. So
yeah,
it's all these books, right? Like Lord of the Rings, these classics. So 8 million
yeah,
copies, and so that means if you're lower than 80,000 on the Amazon ranking, and Amazon by far, at least in the United States, is the biggest distributor for books nowadays. So if it's lower than 80,000, that means you're in the top 1%, right? So like a general rule of thumb,
yeah,
like what Tushar was saying, less than 100K would be considered a good performance book, and that's what you shoot for. And I'll be honest, like my book don't always rank under that. It would hover around that range, and then it would also do something else too. But yeah, so that was that's kind of a good benchmark on what's a performance book.
yeah,
Yeah, so also there are some questions. So let me go ahead and show them.
yeah.
So Barath asked, what will be the next technology to learn with satellite communication and the cloud? Um, I think the cloud. I don't really know. My crystal ball is actually in the shop, so I don't have it with me. But I can't tell the future. But I think if you look at some of the popular topics, the cloud obviously is still day two. You have all these other technologies like Python, which just became number one ranking programming language. That's still worth your effort to learn, and a lot of other topics. So I would say, unfortunately, that's not a great answer, but I think Tushar, you wanted to say something.
I, I'm just trying to understand the question. I think it's Bharat is trying to inquire about IoT and cloud and how to communicate with satellites. Uh, I'm not really sure, Bharat. If you can just try it again and better define the question, we'll be able to understand it.
Yeah, fair enough. So the next question would be, how do you, I guess, vet book ideas on emerging practices? What does that process look like? We went over this a little bit, but Tushar, why don't you, just go into depth a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so emerging practices again, it's all about trends. So I'll speak about one of my most recent books. It was a book on Transformers. So I was keeping a track of Transformers for a long, long time, and I was talking to quite a few industry experts. So Transformers is a deep learning architecture for natural language processing. And yeah, I was keeping a track of it, and I was seeing a lot of different deep learning architectures popping up for it. And there were so many articles, and that's when we planned out that there is no book out there. And we should be the first ones in the market to publish a book on such a topic. And we did that. We published the book on Transformers in early Jan this year. So when we did that, the book is still selling like crazy because there is still no competition on it, or well, at least there is no published one. Then Pack published a couple of more books to complete the learning path. So people, if they want to learn about a broad book, they can pick up Transformers for natural language processing. If they've done that, they can then next go to mastering Transformers. If they want to learn about a specific deep learning architecture, they can pick up getting started with Google BERT or exploring GPT-3. So yeah, there are a lot of different books about it. So I think that's the vetting thing that we do. We keep a track of a lot of different trends, the pain points, and yeah, so that's what the process is for that.
Yeah, thanks, Tushar. That's a good point. What's the ratio? So I think it's always a risk, right? So emerging ideas and practices, and you're taking a risk both as an author who's spending the time and effort, as well as the
Yeah,
publisher. So what is the? I mean, you do your homework, like you said, but it's no guarantee that you'll be a success. So what is the
yeah,
hit and miss ratio? You would say. Uh, I don't know. Is that okay to disclose, or
yeah,
is
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, sure.
okay?
Uh, So there are hits and misses. There is both. So at Pact, there are two different teams. So Pact works quite differently as compared to other publishers. So at Pact, there is a team which is dedicated on focusing in on emerging practices. Uh, they pu- they publish books on newer practices, newer technologies, niche practices, wherein it will be targeted to a very, very small community. And then there is the team that I work in, which focuses completely on experts like you, Eric, and successful books, which are published by the mainline team. We pick that book up in our team, and then we try and take it to the next level. So the easier way to distinguish that on Amazon or on the back catalog is when you see the author's picture on the book cover. That is a book which has been successful in the previous editions, and we've taken it on board and we are multiplying the performance of the book.
Yeah, so that's a good point too. So Tushar, as you mentioned, there are different teams within Pact, right? So for an emerging practice, and just like my book was, you started out with just the kind of a general team, right? So they would
Yeah.
they would give you a chance to publish it. They do their homework on Google search trends and
Oh, yeah.
conferences and all of that, right? But that is still with the general team on giving you a
Yeah.
chance on this emerging, and what they'll probably start with is a learning path, right? Like the learning series, as we talked about, that has the widest reach of potential audience.
Yeah.
And once that's a success, or once that's proven to be a success on the sales volume and numbers, then you explore into, the mastering series or the cookbooks type of books. And then also your team, after the two editions, you reached out, and this is a specific team within Pact. As you say, that's a little bit different. That it's an expert series where the book has a proven record of X amount of sales volume, and then you
Yeah.
work with the authors to give you more resources and more
Yeah.
dedicated, and so on. So I think
Yeah.
that's a summarization of what you said, or did I miss
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, so the mainline team who work on emerging practices, they are an extremely talented bunch, and they are way ahead than I am. So they are way more talented than I am personally. So what we try to do in our team is we pick up the books which are performing well, and we ensure that the author gets further support. And it's not just limited to the book, but also the content and even the post publication. We support the author with building up their brand, sharing more and more conference opportunities or whatever it is, wherever we can publicize the book as much as possible. Like with Eric, we were discussing the possibility of going deeper into the community with the next edition, and trying to collaborate with the Python community. And well, hopefully, we can, well, aim for the
Oh yeah,
stars.
yeah. I don't know. We'll see about
Yeah,
that. But we'll definitely try to work with the community.
yeah,
So I want to get this question in. I mean, we're coming up on an hour, but I want to get this question in because this is one of the top three questions I get. How long does it take
hmm
to write a book? And
Ooh,
I think really that's where that pre-planning comes into place, and that's why
yeah,
it's helpful to think about that, right? So usually, I don't know, people, and it's different than everybody. That's why it's so hard to answer. For me
mm,
personally, because of the pre-planning process, I generally have a good idea, as well as if I look ahead of the schedule I have, um how long it might take, right? You kind of have a guess on that, especially with family situation. If you have a newborn baby, it's different than, your kids are off in college, right? That's for
yeah,
sure. So generally, I would say it takes anywhere between 6 months to 2 years. I think that's what I heard from other authors. For me, I always try to find a good time. If I know the next few months, like I told Tushar multiple times on this one, actually, if the next few months it doesn't work for me, we'd rather to wait until you could
yeah,
focus on the book project. So generally, if you could find an optimal time and undisturbed few months to work on it, I think generally that's good enough as long as you're disciplined on
yeah,
writing, and writing and focusing, and you generally know the material well enough that you don't have to do a lot of research. But I'll tell you, in my writing experience, I even though I know the material like 90%, I still go on and double check just because I'm so scared
yeah,
of misrepresenting something. And I think that's true for a lot of people. So pad that up a little bit. And also, writing the book is one thing. It generally takes a lot of I don't know, like generally takes about 30% more time as far as proofreading, uh, editing your book, coming back. I mean, you could be the perfect writer in the world. You still make grammar mistakes. There's
mm,
still passages that you're not unclear about. So the first draft would not be the final one. So you plan some
yeah,
time to rewrite those. And then afterwards, there's also time that they have to do, copy editing. They have to do, book covers, all the other post process to pre-sell the book, listing, and so on. That takes another month as well. So if you
yeah,
count that backwards, that's generally like 8 months already, right? So
yeah.
Tushar, you have something to say about that?
Yeah, so I think publishing a book right from ideation and well, that entire process takes on an average about 6 to 12 months.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's not something to be worried about because it's not 6 to 12 months of full-time writing.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people write in the evenings, some write over the weekends, some write while they're traveling. There are a lot of authors that I work with who travel a lot. So while they're traveling, because they are offline, they tend to do a lot of their writing at that time.
Right.
But more than the writing, it's the research that goes on at the back end.
Yeah. Oh my god.
So yeah, so it's about being up to date with what you have to write. So it's preparing. that's when the ideation bit really, really helps you a lot. So I've worked with a few authors who make this common mistake. A lot of people, what they do is they try and complete the manuscript first and then they try to find the publisher.
Hmm.
Uh, because they feel that probably later on I may not be able to commit that much time. I generally, with my experience, out of the tons of manuscripts I've received, only 10 to 12 of them have gone through to publication.
Mm.
Uh, because by the time they've completed the manuscript and they've come to us, there was so much that we could have helped them during the process of it, or any other publisher for that matter. They could have helped them with during the ideation process itself, and we would have saved them a lot of time and energy. They missed that and they jumped ahead and they wrote the entire book and they came. So the entire vetting process was missed, and by the time the manuscript was ready, the technology was either way behind or we were way too late to the market. So it didn't make sense to publish a book as such.
Yeah. So I think what you said, I would concur with that 100%. It's idea of minimum viable product, right? So
Yeah.
as soon as you, so this goes into our next question. If you have a book idea, how do you go about making a published book? So uh, have an idea and then make it into a minimum viable product, whatever that is, whether that's a blog post, go out and publish that, whether that's a conference proposal, go out and do that, right? So as long as you could generate some feedback into a forum, or this could
Mm,
be, and very, all of the publishers have forms that you could fill out to propose your book idea. So don't wait until, like Tushar said, don't wait until you finish the book, like we're even
mm,
halfway into the book. Find that
yeah.
minimal viable product channel and submit that proposal. If that we're talking about books, right? So submit that proposal as a conference talk, as a book proposal, and work with an editor to actually fine tune that. Leverage their experience, right? It's in the best interest to have a best selling book. So yeah, if you have an idea, go submit that proposal, and go from there and use them as a partner, use them as a resource to help you get that idea out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're actually up on the hour. I know we have one. I want to. We have a few more questions, but I don't think. But I think we covered the most ones. The ones that I really want to cover, the top three already, that we already covered. So there's one more coming. On so on Barath. So let's just say I have read your master in Python networking. It's nice. What do you suggest, Python or YAML or JSON? Um, I think all of them. Well, thanks for reading the book to begin with. So yeah, I appreciate the readership, and a lot of times we don't get to choose actually because we're in the world of vendor driven or company driven, cloud driven. So we're actually on the receiving end of that, right? I could say what I prefer. I prefer Python and JSON in the message exchanges, but I don't get to pick. So if it's netconf, I do netconf. If it's Yang model, I have to do Yang model in order to get my point across, right? But given a choice, it's always Python and JSON. So, you know, uh, thanks, Brath, for the question. There's one more on the which company will be their cloud technology strongest cloud.
Ooh.
So I'm sorry. Let me read that. Which company will be their cloud technology strongest cloud company? Um, I don't know. Like I said, my crystal ball's in the shop. I can't veer into that. But just judging from the most market share, I would say it's AWS, right? They had the head start, and I'm kind of impartial because I where I live, I work for both AWS and Azure. So both of them pay for my mortgage at one point in time. So it's not a favoritism. It's I think just purely judging by market share. Right now is AWS, but who knows, right? Like Azure is coming out strong.
Yeah.
So before we part, I had such a great time. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for all the great questions. I really enjoy them. I mean, this is the best part about streaming, even though there's a lot of prep work, but this is the best part about streaming. Any call to action, any parting words, Tushar, before we say goodbye?
No, just keep your questions coming, and then after Eric publishes this on LinkedIn and YouTube, we'll go back and we'll pick up five random names, and I'll get them announced on LinkedIn after we've done that. And yeah, and you'll get a chance to win a free ebook of Eric's Mastering Python Networking third edition, And don't worry about it if you've already purchased the book and if you read it. We'll open the pack library for you. Just,
Yeah, we don't
just
want to
pick.
punish the people who purchased the book.
Yeah, you can pick and choose any book that you like from our catalog, and yeah, we'll get that out to you.
Yeah, that's very generous. You again, thanks Tushar for being here. I really appreciate it. I think your opinion is much more valuable than mine because I'm one single data point, right? You cover all the spectrum and the 7 years of experience. So I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Eric. This was really fun. Thank you so
Y-
much. Thanks,
Yeah, and
everyone.
thanks everyone. I will see you next time. If you have any questions, make sure you comment on either YouTube or LinkedIn, and see you there. Have a good one. Bye bye.
Bye.